cool. So welcome to JR and then any future people who may be watching this. We are Pasifikas in Medicine. We're a group of Pacific Islander medical students currently just across the US, but we're all from different years, and really a lot of the purpose of this group is just to help the future generations, because we know how hard it can be when you're applying to medical school. A lot of us kind of had to figure this out on our own or within like our small communities. And so we're here to share our experience to show that you can do things several ways, and it can work out. You can be successful to go to medical school. My name is Ciela Tealpa. I am a third year at the University of Utah School of Medicine. I'm just going to be facilitating reading questions, and then I'll have the panelists introduce themselves. And I'm talking a lot right now, but after this, I'm like not going to talk. I just want to mention, I'll drop it in the chat, but we do have a website, and there's different things on the website. But the thing I want to mention is we have a roster with different members of Pasifikas in Medicine. It's members of our group who have agreed to mentor students, anyone who's interested in it. So you can, oh, we have another person. You can visit the website and you can read a little bit about who each person is and like where they did school and stuff. And then I'll drop another form, like a Google form, and then you can request a mentor. You can either pick someone from the roster, or if you just want to be assigned randomly, both of those options are on there. So I'll drop those in the chat for anyone in the future watching this, and JR and I think Mele. Feel free, we're here to help. We're here to help you all, and we want you to be successful. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time to the panelists. If you will introduce yourselves, please.
Yeah, why don't I start that? Hi guys, my name is Micah. I'm from Utah mostly. I'm now currently a second year medical school, and I'm going to Nova Southeastern University, which is all the way out in Florida. And then for specialties, I'm tentatively interested in orthopedic surgery. So it's a little bit about me. I don't know if you wanted us to add other things, CLA, but.
I'm Piueti. I'm also a second year here at the University of Hawaii's Medical School. Yeah, and also interested in ortho.
So I'll go next. My name is Maka. I'm from Hawaii, North Shore of Oahu. I go to school in like Western New York, University of Rochester. I'm pretty much on the border of Canada, so way up north. I'm currently interested in orthopedics, and I'm a third year, so I'm gonna be applying this upcoming cycle for residency.
Hey everybody, my name is Devon. I'm originally from Utah. Going now to school at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. I'm also a third year med student, and I'm looking to go into ophthalmology this year.
We do sound very specialty heavy. I'm interested in internal medicine, so not a specialty, but awesome. And Mele, I think you just joined, but JR and Mele, feel free to jump in anytime if you have questions. This is like open. We do have some questions planned just to talk a little bit about like our extracurricular activities, what we've done in the past and stuff. And then there was a couple of questions submitted beforehand, but if you have questions at any time, you're welcome to drop them in the chat or to just unmute yourself. You're welcome for that. But I guess we're just going to start with a couple of the questions from Instagram. And to get started, and the first question is, how do you personally address challenges in medical school?
Okay, well, I'm probably not the best one to answer. That's why I didn't want to answer first. But I think like I take a lot of things personally. So I think honestly this group has helped me a lot, and I call Micah a lot for a lot of things. But I think how do I deal with things in medical school? I cry and I vent, and then I communicate with a lot of our members, and then I just go back and keep doing it. So I don't know if that's the best answer.
I can add a little bit to that as well. So as far as like challenges, I know this question's kind of broad, but to give a little background, I have a young family, so I'm married. My wife is from American Samoa, so it's good to have that the similar culture. I'm from Hawaii, so we have that in common. We have a young son; he's almost 2, and so what I do is when I have challenges in medical school, I try to just reframe the challenge and just kind of remember the big picture. Like no matter how hard medical school is, or no matter how hard challenges are, my family's healthy, my son is thriving, and everyone in my family is doing well. And the hard part about medical school is you're constantly being evaluated. So, like Piueti said, I tend to take things personally too. A lot of us who go to medical school we're pretty focused on like the outcome, and so we're so focused on like achieving. And so when you're evaluated and it's not quite up to what you've done in the past, it can be challenging. So I think just trying to reframe things and remember the bigger picture, I think is something that I've tried to do, and not always perfectly, but something I've been trying to work on.
Yeah, I'll just echo. These guys are giving great advice. There's a lot of a lot of challenges I never knew I was gonna have to face and deal with in med school. But I just honestly believing in myself, because I know I take things really hard. I take it personal, and so it's really taught me to kind of have more confidence in myself, move forward despite the challenges, and really like what Maka said. It's just at the end, med school is so important to me, but I also have a small family, and my loved ones. They're what's most important for me. So sometimes if I'm gonna take a hit in med school to care after my family, for me that's worth it.
And then real quickly, I guess I'll just add on, you'll probably deal with challenges the same way in med school that you have in the past. So I think it's just important that you evaluate maybe previous challenges that you've had and how you've dealt with them, and, what you've learned, and then just be ready, because obviously challenges are going to come, later in life, especially in med school. So, yeah.
Thanks everyone for your answers. I saw this theme of, like community is a big part of what gets you through med school, and your family, which I think sticks to a lot of our values of who we are as a Pasifika people. The next question, a little different, is how many schools did you apply to, and why did you choose the current school you're at? And I guess you can say too, like, remind everyone which school you went to and stuff.
Yeah, I can start with that one. I think I ended up applying to maybe 32 schools. So, okay, so for me, so I only applied to MD schools. And then I basically applied to every school that I was eligible for. So I was a business major for my undergrad. So there were a lot of medical schools that I really couldn't go because I was just short on science classes. So after I found all the lists that I'd be eligible for, I then narrowed it down to ones that were out of state friendly, because there's a ton of schools where they really only accept 5% out of state. So I didn't apply to those. And then, unfortunately, I just sucked it up, paid the money, and then I just applied to every other school. Sorry, and then was part two why why I picked the school I picked. Um, yeah, and then really I just this was the only school, honestly. This was the best school that I got into. There were, like, towards the end I thought about maybe applying to some DO schools, but then I got in here, and that's what I went with. And then they gave me a scholarship, so everything worked out.
Mine is very similar to Micah's. I got rejected everywhere. And then I actually got rejected at the school I was at even faster than all the others that I'm at now, that faster than all the other schools. I think I paid my the application fee and they rejected me the next day. But I got into a post-bac that's linked to the med school. So then I just went that route. And yeah, now I'm here, even after they rejected me.
You tell him, Piueti. I had a similar story. Honestly, I was kind of more of on the bigger side than on the chooser side. So I kind of just applied everywhere. For some reason, I had the schools in Ohio were the ones that were most interested in me. So Ohio State was a big school. It was a bigger name. We had some acquaintances that lived here. So I was just trying to find any sort of connection, but I was excited just to try somewhere new. So for me, it was, I think I did 30 schools as well, 30, 35, somewhere in there. And I applied to both, but just or both MD and OD or DO. And yeah, just ended up coming here mostly kind of just as how the cards turned out for me.
That's a very similar story for myself. I applied to probably around 30-ish. So there's the AMCAS, that's the MD application, and then there's a COMIS, which is a DO, and then there's a TEMDAS, which is the Texas schools. So I applied just to MD via TEMDAS, the Texas schools, and AMCAS, and so it was 25-ish AMCAS and the 5 Texas schools I applied to. And so yeah, I applied to about 30. And actually had some success on the interview. Didn't interview at a ton of schools, but had a few. And this was the only school I got into. So I got waitlisted at all the other interviews I had. So maybe that's something I could talk about in the future, do better on the interviews. But so yeah, I actually, what an interesting thing about, I know this is kind of long-winded, but I've noticed that my letter writers, I had a really good letter writer who went to this school for medical school, the school I'm at, and a letter writer, of the 4 letter writers I had, 4 of my interviews came from letter writers. So that's kind of a little tip. If you have a really good letter writer who has a good relationship with the institution, that could be an in to an interview at least. And so yeah, I applied to about 30, maybe got 6 or 7 interviews and only got 1 acceptance. So looking back, I'm happy I'm here, but at the time it was tough to just get the 1, but I was happy I made at least the 1, because I know people who don't have the success of getting in. So yeah, I know it's kind of a long answer, but it's kind of a little bit about my application story.
I got a question, just sort of along the same lines as the applications. First off, thank y'all for doing this, because I think it's amazing. I'm a little bit older, starting a little bit later in life, but you deal with the cards you get. And so when I was directly out of high school, I didn't see anything like this. I graduated high school back in 2007, 2008. And so seeing something like this, and first off, thank you guys. I think this is awesome. But in regards to the applications, what was the most stressful part of applying of that pre-med era of handling school, handling work, and then also doing the applications? To me, I can't even wrap my head around, just sort of the timeline of everything, because it just seems so packed.
I can start that one. So stressful for me. So first off, I do pretty well in school and I test well. So, when I started the whole pre-med, I underestimated how much they would care about the other stuff. I thought if I had the good grades and then if I had a good MCAT, I could chill. So it got stressful because then when I started my application, well, then you have to like put in your extracurriculars and stuff, which is fine. I still did extracurriculars, but then what was really hard, like I don't know, I almost had like breakdowns. You have to like write these paragraphs about every single experience, why it's important to you, make sure the grammar is good, make sure the commas are wherever the heck they're supposed to be. And then depending on the school, they have prompts, and then the prompts have word limits. And it's stressful. And then, I was still in school trying to finish up like my degree and all that stuff. So I think personally, it wasn't bad doing the classes or the tests, but trying to fill in all those essays and stuff, that was a lot for me.
I'm gonna counter that because that wasn't my experience. I think I underestimated the actual test stuff. Well, actually probably the whole school stuff, but then so I guess I didn't really reach out to that many like pre-meds or like even pre-med advisors early on. So then I was just like, oh, like it'll just be like applying to college, which I was just like, somebody has to take me. Apparently they don't. So I think for me, I worked like 3 jobs, and then like I just thought I could just take the test. And so I think for me, like I think I didn't study well, and I didn't in hindsight, I don't even know if I would have wanted to study well. Like kind of just when it comes to standardized test taking, I'm not that great, even in high school. So I think getting over the MCAT was probably the hardest thing for me. I think you can kind of BS your way through a lot of essays and stuff. And if you're real good with your words, I think you can convince anyone to at least want to interview you. So I don't know, but that's just my experience.
Yeah, I kind of have pretty similar to Piueti's experience there. My test score was not the highlight of my. It's probably one of the most stressful parts of the application for me, and it was not one of my highlights on my application. But also like just preparing for it, I decided to take a gap year. So I graduated and then took a whole year off, and that kind of helped me to. Well, I guess I graduated and then I started my interview season and stuff. And so there's a ton of essay writing. I tried to save as much as I could and kind of copy them over, but a lot of the schools have different.
Oh no, did it freeze?
Oh, am I frozen?
You did for a little bit.
Okay, I'm back, hopefully. But yeah, the secondary questions, also all those essays, it's a lot of work and a lot of dedication. But by that point, I had graduated.
So can everyone hear me? Okay. So JR, your question was like, how did you manage it all? And kind of like, what was the hardest part again? I just want to make sure.
Yeah. That was a question.
That's a good question. I'm kind of like a hybrid in between Micah and Piueti, because like my testing is okay to like open the door. Like I wouldn't say I'm an amazing like standardized test taker, but if I put the right amount of effort, I can do well enough to like keep me in the game, so to speak. But then like I will say I did kind of struggle with a lot of the essay stuff. So I will say a lot of these schools have secondary essays. So you apply, your personal statement goes to every school, and then they'll send you a secondary. And like Micah was saying, it's just so hard like filling in. Like when a common prompt is talk about a setback and how you learn from it or something, and you can use a similar story for each prompt from each school, but you got to make sure you tailor it to the school or to the prompt. You want to make sure you answer the prompt correctly. So that was probably the biggest challenge for me, was the secondaries. And because if you're applying to 30, on average, 95% of schools have secondaries, some don't. So you're doing like 28 like secondaries, And so like some schools have like 5 prompts, some have 2, some have 3. So if you can imagine, you're doing like 50 to 60 mini little prompt paragraph essays, which can be which can be pretty daunting. So yeah, like kind of like reach out to people you trust, because maybe if you get our information at the end of this, we can tell you like common prompts so you can kind of get your mind going on, like setback is a common one, diversity is a common one, like why our school is a common one. So like really know the school. So yeah, like that was probably my biggest challenge, was just writing those little essays. And I also took a gap year like Devon, so like I wasn't stressed on like finishing school like Michael was, and continuing to do well in classes. So it was a little less stressful on that end, but the essay part was probably the most stressful for me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for that. In regards to like the application, one thing that I'm finding very difficult is shadowing. How many hours of shadowing did y'all do, especially now with like the pandemic and everything? The past couple of years. Well, what have y'all done for shadowing or trying to get that your clinical hours up?
I would just say get a job, but that's just because I don't want to work for free. So like I'm just not gonna shadow and like not get paid. So for me, all my shadowing came from working. and I worked like probably like 4 different like clinics over the years. So because I think I took 2 years off. So I worked in an IVF clinic, and then I worked in like a bunch of like different small clinics. And then a lot of places that you need to have like a degree for certain things. So I found all my jobs on Craigslist. So those are all like the little clinics that like were real like desperate for work. So like they weren't checking for like specific certifications. So that's my advice. But
I like the Craigslist thing because that's how I got my last job.
I just want to hop in. Because of COVID, a lot of schools are doing away with like a shadowing requirement, which is very different than what it was prior to COVID. Like at my school, they don't really, because it is such a challenge for pre-med students, I think any ways to get shadowing hours. But because of the pandemic, with like the restrictive, like how many people they allow and stuff in a room, a lot of the schools are going away with that. Go ahead, Maka.
Oh, sorry, Charlotte. So yeah, Jared, shadowing one it's kind of one of those things where med schools mainly want you to shadow so they know that your interest is like authentic, because they have to weed through so many applications. So they want you to hit like a critical number, and to be honest, I'm sorry I can't tell you like the average number that would be good. But like Ciala said, given the pandemic, I think the shadowing thing is a lot different than when majority of us applied 2-3 years ago. So I kind of like what Piueti said about like a lot of my friends in undergrad got like scribes in the ER, like a job as a scribe in the ER. That's built-in work experience. You learn a lot of the medical lingo, which is great for medical school, and then that's built-in clinical experience. So kind of hits three different areas in one endeavor, So if you could find a job that's manageable, that's not crazy, that's not going to take away from other things. So like, yeah, that would probably be the best way to get clinical, because you don't have to worry about the restrictions with COVID, because shadowing is a lot harder to do than finding a clinical job given the pandemic.
Just real quick, for my hours, I worked as my internet connection is unstable, but I worked as a certified nursing assistant. So I actually worked with Ciala's mom, and I went around to basically just give showers to the different clients that we had. But that counted for me, and no one like questioned me. I just made sure to like tie the experience I had there into like a medical perspective to kind of help the people understand why I was still interested in medicine more than like nursing kind of thing. But
Yeah, and I will say, obviously, it's changed. So my school included, they really stopped caring about the shadowing hours. But for me, my shadowing hours were really just kind of junk. There was one doctor I went to church with, and he let me shadow him. And then I wasn't really successful like cold emailing or cold texting or whatever, but I did show up. I showed up to like an ophthalmologist guy's like office and I asked about shadowing and that worked. And then that was really it. I really didn't have a lot of hours, but I made it. I hit the minimum.
Well, thank you guys. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and something that happened with Devon and I, we both shadowed a Pacific Islander doctor, and she was kind enough, she would reach out to her colleagues that weren't Pacific Islander, and she would ask them, she'd say, hey, I have a student, can they come shadow you? And they would say no to me, but they didn't say no to her because, she's like a colleague and stuff. And so that was one way I like was able to get my hours, but I think really they're moving away from a lot of like the shadowing requirements. But if you have a certain school in mind, you should check in with their admissions office what they're like, because before they used to say we want our students to have 40 hours or whatever, or the average student who applies has 40 hours or whatever the number is. So if you have certain schools you're interested in, I would check what their admission requirements are. And something I know I'm not a part of the panel, but I just did contrast a little. I only applied to 5 schools. And so because, and the reason I'm sharing this is because I was very late in the application cycle. I took the MCAT August 30th or whatever, which is like really late. And then I submitted my application on October 31st and AMCAS closed on November 1st. So I was very late in the game to get my application together. So when I talked to my mentor, she said, pick 5 schools that you would actually really, really want to go to and go for it. So if money is an issue, or if you're just like, I don't know if I can do 30, you can be strategic in which schools you pick. So you don't have to apply. I think that's the standard usually what people do, but you don't have to. The next question, which I think was kind of related to the last question, is did you have a job prior to medical school? Did you have a job while you're working in undergrad? And then if so, if you did have a job, how did you use that in your medical school application to make you a stronger applicant?
I can start with this one. During medical school, during undergrad, I had just student jobs. I worked at like the Multicultural Student Services Center. And I took some of those experiences and just tied them into my application through questions on like diversity or things that I learned that way. Like I said, I took a year off from medical school and from undergrad to medical school. And it's really important that if you do take a year off, you're able to explain what you did. A lot of times people don't want to see that there's just this year of your life that nothing happened, you didn't do anything. So during that year, I worked 2 jobs. I was a CNA, so certified nursing assistant, and then I taught. I was a nursing assistant for just a little bit. Then I got a research job at a lab at BYU at my undergrad. And then I also signed up to teach English as a second language, which I thought it was like not a super common thing. And so some of my interviewers did ask about that. And it was like cool to be able to tell them, because I do actually, when I do graduate, I want to work at like an educational center and participate in teaching. And so that was something that I could connect on. What's really cool, honestly, is that if you can just take any connection or any experience that you have and just show them why it's important to you and how that will benefit you as a doctor, you can honestly make any experience work. I would just say, just make sure you're accounting for like all the time. If you do take a gap year, if you do have years off, be able to explain what you did and what you learned during that time.
Yeah, I can go next. So the first 2 years of college, I played football, so I really didn't work that much. But then like the next 2 years, and then kind of just sparse randomly. Like I did a lot of landscaping. There was, again, someone that I went to church with owned like a construction company. So, there was like landscaping and remodeling that I do sporadically. Like every other, weekend I'd go and do like 2 days or whatever. And and that was enough combined with, FAFSA and then random scholarships. Football was pretty easy for me to include on the application, but unfortunately, the landscaping, I really couldn't figure out how to work it in. And I don't think it really added anything, so I actually didn't include that anywhere on my application. I think in hindsight, probably if I spent more effort, I could have worked it into some essays, but I was just done with that stuff. So it was really just the football I included.
Okay, well, Micah, that was my whole application. I worked in Piueti and doing a lot of that during college. And then I got into I think the only reason I had to work it in was because I wasn't really doing anything else. So I had nothing else to explain everything that I was doing. So I did do a lot of like, sorry, like landscaping and construction for a good portion of my undergrad. And then I got into modeling and then did that for a couple of years until probably like the 2 years right before I applied, because I took a 2-year gap year. And then I was like, oh, let me get like a grown person job in a medical field or something. And then I was able to work that in. But I think for me, I attributed everything into like, I don't know, hard work or like you just gotta play it a certain way. But obviously maybe it didn't work because I got rejected from a lot of places. But they do make great interview conversation, I think. So you can, I guess, make it work if you want to.
I got a sort of off-topic question, I guess. Why medicine, or why medical school and not like PA? I'm sure you guys have had that question prior to, but like, why did y'all want to become doctors and not go the PA route or the NP route?
I'll start with that one. I think there's a lot of jobs in healthcare where they're really similar, but to some extent, there's this trade-off between lifestyle and expertise. Do you know what I mean? And I think for me, like the idea of like being the leader, being the most expert on a topic, I think was really appealing. To some extent, it maybe seems a little bit prideful to say like, oh, I want to be the best at whatever thing, but that's kind of what it was for me. Where I was willing to make, maybe some of the sacrifices on like the time and whatever to, be like said expert on whatever topic. So that's why I did, the MD over PA or NP or all those other ones.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to think about that one pretty deep actually, because like Micah was saying, the PA, NP, they're called APPs in the medical field. That route is appealing for a lot of people because there's a lot of flexibility. For example, I can be a PA in orthopedics, and then a couple of years later, I'm like, I'm not feeling orthopedics anymore. I can go be a PA in cardiology, and so that's the appeal for a lot of people. And kind of like what Michael was saying, the reason why medical school was the right choice for me, I desired the expertise part, because like what I've learning in third year of medical school is that like a PA knows a lot more than a resident physician, like a physician in training. But by the time you get fully trained, you kind of like get a little bit above the PA, and then like you keep continuing this expertise. But a PA is a very crucial part of the medical team. But I think you have to really decide for yourself. I think it really is the expertise versus lifestyle component that Micah talked about, because for medical school, you put in a lot more years, you take out a lot more loans, and you give up a lot more time away from other things to pursue that expertise. And so I think that's what it really came down to for me as well. So I kind of just second that as well.
I don't have a lot to add to that either. I think for me, honestly, I didn't really know the role of a PA or an NP before I came. Now that I've been here and I've worked with NPs and NPAs, I mean, it's an excellent career choice. It's an amazing job. They do amazing work. I learned so much from them. I really appreciate all the different healthcare workers now that I've been able to work in the field a little bit more and see what they do. Um, One of my best friends, actually, she was also going to apply for med school and she went the PA route and she just graduated and she's got like her job now and she seems like she's living the life. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. But I think for me, I definitely like the expertise. And then I really like the idea of also the responsibility because when you're the physician, ultimately, even if you have a PA working with you or an NP, they're working under your name, under your license. And for me, I wanted to be able to have that freedom to take full responsibility for my patients, to really try and like, it was going to be on me to get to understand who they are as a person, get to understand their disease, and ultimately my decision and my choice on how to treat them the best way. And so I really like that idea of being able to take full responsibility of my patients.
I don't have that much to add. I think I was just a little ignorant and I was like, oh, this sounds great. Let me just go this route. So
It's funny now that like I'm a third year, sometimes like when you're in med school, third and fourth years, you're working like the clinical settings. And a lot of times I'm like, dang, I should have been a PA because I'd be done or close to done by now and making money or whatever. And I could hop around. But like I remember one of the residents, we had a nurse who was asking us to do something. She was like, you should do this. And the resident, there was a reason why we weren't doing that. And the resident was like, no, we can't. And then like my resident told me, he's like, you know, nurses are so good at like clinically, they can see things like better than probably like physicians can. And PAs and NPs and whatever field, they get really, really good at what they do. But doctors really understand the why behind a lot of things, like because we study the physiology and the pathology, the pathophys, we understand why we can and can't do things at a different level. I think like they said, like the expertise. But every like nurse and NP, PA, like they all play like such an important role on the team. And sometimes I think maybe I should have been a nurse or a social worker or something. I question that, but for me too, I understood there was like a lot of changes that I didn't like about the healthcare, and that one of the ways to get a seat at the table to be able to make those changes, this is one way you can do it. And so that was one reason like I chose this versus other things. You can have a voice in whatever you do, but that was one reason. The next question was about volunteer work. So that's like a big thing you'll see on med school applications, like service or service hours and stuff. So for members of the panel, what did you do for volunteer work, and how often did it like come up in the application cycle and stuff, and any advice you have around volunteer work?
I have Tongan parents, so they volunteer me for everything without me asking. So I honestly I just counted them all. So like I had to, I think yeah, they made me work a lot with the community in a lot of different ways. My mom works like with like feeding the homeless, so that was just like every Sunday, every week, Wednesday. So I was like, well, might as well add that in. So I think for me, I didn't really have to try that hard. And I think as Pacific Islanders, if you really try to think about it, you could probably count a lot of things as volunteer. Like, did I want to look over everybody's like resumes? Like in like when I was at church, my mom would just like be like, oh yeah, send it her way. And I'm like, you know what? We're counting that as like volunteer because now I'm doing like educational things. So I don't know. I don't know if that's right, but I just counted a lot of things.
Kind of on that as well, I would say a lot of the activities I did, I didn't sign up for them for the volunteer work. I did it because it was fun, but there was like an aspect of volunteer work. So I was sure I would highlight that. on my application and include like one of the things I did. I was a part of a dance group. We went around or whatever all year. It was just a lot of fun. We had a big performance, but then we would take some time. We'd do like visits to like the Navajo reservation or even like Mexico or things. And we put on free shows, and I was sure to include that. Like this is a volunteer service I did, and I got asked a lot of questions on that and how it went. Then just like a couple other points. I tried to find something unique for volunteer work because a lot of people do the same things, which is good, but it's just a way for me to stand out. So I like found this wheelchair basketball team, and they needed like practice players. So I like sat down in the chair and I was like trying to play, and they smashed me, and I was horrible at it, but it was so much fun, and it came up a lot on my application as well. So if you can find something kind of a little bit more unique, that can also help. And then just one last point, one of my best experiences for volunteer work was just in a elementary school. I was just helping children read. It was like a dual immersion school. That's like pretty common. It's not something super standout, but I asked the teacher for a letter of recommendation, and almost every school mentioned that letter of recommendation. So I would just say with your volunteer work, it's important, and just make sure that you're able to spin it so that it works and looks best on your application for you.
Yeah, and let me just add to that part of like, make sure you like your volunteer activities, because the rest of the pre-med stuff, like going through your classes and the tests, they're all hard. So if you're just doing the volunteer to get the hours, then it's also hard. So I think for me, the two big volunteer activities I made sure that I liked. One of them, I just became like a wrestling coach. I'm big into sports, so I did, I coach wrestling. And then the other one, I worked at this place called the Happy Factory, and basically you just make like toy cars for kids in need, and then you just send them all over the place. But it's nice because you get to use your hands. You're cutting all these blocks of wood, and just it's always fun to I like the woodworking dexterity type stuff. So that was an easy one. I will say there's all kinds of websites or things to like see if you can find a volunteer activity that like meets your interests. So if anyone needs volunteer hours, I definitely suggest that first they try and find like a volunteer activity that seems fun to them, and then, worry about the hours after.
You could also volunteer for PIM. There's always stuff we got to do.
Yeah, I know. Just a couple things. Yeah, like what Michael was saying, find something that appeals to you first, and then to go along with what Devin said, if it's something that appeals to you and it's something that could possibly be unique, then that's like a plus. Because I one of the volunteer things I did was something that a lot of interviewers brought up. It was called like CASA. It was like a court appointed service advocate. So you work with, it's pretty sad sometimes these cases, you work with kids who are in tough situations, and you kind of help them through some of their challenges. And basically what you do is like, you're just an advocate for them in court, whether it be for like custody battles and stuff like that. So I found that through like a community organization, and it's just something that I was passionate about, because you'd be surprised. Like I went to school in Provo, Utah, and you'd be surprised at a lot of the kids who go through a lot of real struggles, even in Provo, which is a relatively safe environment. So just finding volunteer things that appeal to you. And that was pretty much the only volunteer thing I did, besides, the random stuff that all of us get volunteered for by family and friends. So that was the one that I did on my own versus getting told, volunteer for this, volunteer for that. So
There's just a little bit of time left, like 10 minutes, but just want to open it up if there was like any other extracurricular activities that you didn't talk about that you wanted to mention because you thought it was a strong part of your application. Feel free to bring that up. And then also, like, what overall like general advice would you give about any extracurricular activities, whether it's research, volunteer, working a job, or anything like that? If you have any specific advice, we've heard some of it, but if you have advice that you would like to share.
Yeah, maybe I can start. JR and anyone else, I think something useful is really a lot of times you need like specific tailored advice. So, when it comes to I don't know how far along you are, but, you know, since now you kind of know a group that you could ask for like advice, if you need someone to like look at your resume or like look at what activities you have and let you know what kind of stuff you need, I think it's really helpful because I think for a lot of people, they just don't know where they're weak unless they've talked to somebody else and gotten like another perspective. So I think that's really one of the really helpful things is just making sure that you're talking to other people that can help steer you towards, whether you need like better test scores or GPA or more volunteer or leadership or whatever. So that would be my one advice.
This advice I'm hearing a lot for like more like in med school or for residency apps, but I think it actually kind of like fits well with like med school too, because I didn't necessarily do it, but like someone was telling me about how important it is to make sure a lot of things like kind of fit the story that you want to tell. So if you say like, oh, like I love working with Pacific Islanders and you have nothing working with Pacific Islanders, it looks kind of weird. So I think it's just like if like a lot of your like community services with like a certain like population of people, like making that kind of like catering the rest of your application around that to kind of fit that. I don't know if it's helpful, but if you can, maybe just trying to pick certain things that so you're not just random and now you're trying to tie in modeling, like landscaping, and then like now like just all these random things.
That's a good. Sorry, Devin, my bad. But yeah, I think I agree with what's been said so far. Getting the specific advice is key, and like making sure there's a theme to your application, I think is very important. But I will say, yeah, like I don't know how far along you are in the path and in the pre med. But what a good mentor once told me, she said that grades at MCAT only open the door, but your extracurriculars kind of like allow you to step into the door. So like you got to get the GPA and MCAT like solid, because without that, then no doors are open. But once those doors are open, the extracurriculars and the things that really make you who you are kind of open that door and allow you to get those interviews or to get that interest. So what I really think it comes down to is just having that foundation with the grades and MCAT and all that. And once that's squared away, finding things that you are passionate about that can like create that theme that Piueti was talking about. Because yeah, it's sometimes it's hard if your app doesn't have a theme to try to incorporate, like let's say for example you volunteered at this thing and that thing and the other thing and your research is like all over the place, and so it's kind of hard sometimes to really show that. But if you can do that, then you'll be set up for success.
Yeah, these guys giving excellent advice. I agree with everything that they said. I just to add on, I guess I would say be careful. Just one random piece of advice: be careful against doing like a big service project. Like for example, I like went to Mexico for a week and we like built houses and changed all these people's lives, and not one person cared to ask me about that because they're like, you did that for 1 week and then you came home and you went back to your normal life. So if you can choose like do activities that are ongoing and show that over time you stuck with it and did it, those will definitely stick out a lot more. And then as far as like just the application in general, I always thought that I like had to go out and change myself, change the world, do all these amazing things so I could prove. But honestly, like you already are unique, you already are enough. It's just a matter of like Piueti was saying, taking the things that you do and creating a theme with it, finding things that you enjoy, being honest and true, and just being able to show that these things that I love to do, these things that make me who I am, will make me into an effective and wonderful doctor one day as well. You already have all the potential you need. You just need to show the people at the schools why they need you at their school. So just know you already have all the building blocks you need. It's just a matter of putting them together in a picture that will help people see who you are.
sorry, this is Mella. Thank you for your answers, but I just have a question about, my question is more from like people who are in who came from a kind of a community like mine. I came from a less privileged, very small Polynesian community in Alaska. So small community, small town, just that whole entire mindset, which is a thing. If any of you come from that kind of community, my question is, because my husband obviously is a doctor right now, and you guys all know who he is, but he came from a bigger community, exposed to a whole network of people that I did not have the same privilege of being exposed to. And so for kids in high school or even in college and from my community, like how would you help them to see medicine as an actual option for them? Because their minds are not like open to that. They don't see it as something that they can do or achieve. So if you are from a community like that or similar to that, what was it like? What was the kicker for you? Like, what made you think I can try to be a doctor? This looks like an option for me. Sorry, it's very long.
Sorry, I'm just trying to think about the question. Was it more like what made me like finally like kind of decide that I could go into it, or like how to get other people? Because I'm not sure which one, so I'll just kind of answer randomly and then someone can correct me. I think for me specifically, I think because I think this kind of worked in my favor. So like, because I was so uneducated about the field, I didn't really know like kind of what I was going up against, and like if things were possible, if they weren't really that possible. I just knew that I didn't really see that much. And then I'm like, you know what? And I think this happened even for like when I was doing my post-bac. I know a lot of people like kind of went into my post-bac and they're like, oh, like only 50% of like the people actually pass like this post-bac, like how are you going to do it? But I think when you just kind of go in not really knowing that like you could fail, it kind of works out in your favor because you just kind of do what you need to do. So I think like when it came to medicine, when I just I really applied kind of randomly, and I'm kind of similar to Ciale where it was like August and I was like, like maybe being a doctor might be kind of cool. And then I'm like, okay, let me just submit my application, not knowing that it was too late already and not doing those types of things. But I think what really got me was just like, I just saw kind of just like a need in the community. And then I was like, maybe that need could be filled by me. I don't know why, I just kind of randomly thought about it. And then briefly just like went through like that kind of mindset of like, I could just apply. But I think now, like in hindsight, what I realize is like, because there's not like that many like people who are as visible, I think for me, I think that's why. So like right now I use Instagram a lot. And so like right now, like I've been sharing a lot about like step studying and how it really is rough for me. And I didn't realize, like, I think I get like so many messages every day and everybody's like, oh my gosh, I thought I was like the only one, and like things like that. So I think being more visible about certain places that I'm in has been helping other people to be like, oh wait, I never thought about this. Like I have a few questions. So I get a lot of personal questions in my DMs. And I think like when I see like Ciale posts about like third year and stuff, and I'm just like, oh, I didn't consider that. Like, so I think like just like seeing other people doing what they're doing and being more visible about it, like has just like gotten me to question a lot of things. And like wonder like, oh, like maybe this might be for me. Sorry that this advice is all over the place, mainly because I didn't understand the question, but anybody else could just jump in.
That's okay. My question was all over the place, so your answer makes sense.
Mela, I can put my email in the chat if people gotta go, and then maybe we can have a good like back and forth about some of the ideas I have. But I think a large part of it comes to like finding out the right mentors. Because I grew up in Kuluku. There's a really big Polynesian group out there in North Shore of Oahu, and my whole childhood life, everything, I never met a Polynesian doctor. Like it was either people of other races. You know, I don't want to single out any other race that were predominantly physicians, but people of other races who were not Polynesian. So that kind of got me interested. But yeah, I know, and for people's time and for other reasons, I can give my email in the chat, and then we could talk some more.
Thank you.
I'll just add on real quick. I can leave my email as well, but I think for me as well is just finding the right mentors, seeing somebody who is going to encourage me. My honestly, like my dad, he's a Maori immigrant. He was the only one in his family to get an education. He pushed me, and so I think in my own case, I just had parents who helped me to see farther than what I was seeing for myself. But there's a lot that also goes into it.
Yeah, and I'll just, reiterate what these guys said. It comes down to mentors. I think personally for me, I got really lucky, in who my parents were, and they both happened to be educated. But I think for a lot of people that didn't necessarily have the same upbringing as me, I think, having those mentors around or that representation that they can see, makes it a lot more feasible for people to know that it's possible.
Thanks everyone for your answers. And I'm the same too. Like, I feel very privileged because my mom went to college and I had my mom to like kind of guide me, and then too found like a mentor. So I think that's why a lot of us do this group, is it's to like create more visibility and to try to be vulnerable and share, because we know how hard it is. So by us sharing our experiences, I hope even though we're all very different, we all come from different backgrounds and stuff, I hope that inspires people. It's always this hard thing. Like my husband is like, you're Tongan, but you're half Tongan, and you have a mom who went to college and stuff. So he's like, it looks different for you than it looks like for a lot of other people in your community, which can be hard to hear. Your spouse is always keeping you in check and stuff, but I think that's why so many of us dedicate like our free time and stuff, because we understand there's a need and we want to close that gap and stuff. So thanks for your questions though. Thanks, JR. Thanks, Mila. It was nice to have you guys join us.
You guys are awesome.
We're always here to help. And yeah, people have dropped their emails in the chat, and I'm gonna save this recording and we'll post it. And then I will also send up a follow email with like the mentorship requests and stuff. We're always here to answer questions. That's the whole purpose of this group, is to help everyone, because we had a lot of people who opened the door for us. And so we're trying to hold the door open for those who come behind us and stuff. So we're always here to help. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate you attending, and I'll send a follow-up email with everyone's emails to answer questions in the request form. So thank you.